Hello and welcome to the show. Sorry, I didn't realize it was live. I was just sitting here mucking around, and apparently you're all here. Wagon Wheel, where I answer your questions about the IPL at the moment, but maybe something else in the future if I can really keep up this and force the producers to come on. So for those who don't know, I think it was yesterday was a year since we started this YouTube. And it has changed massively in that time. We found our first sponsor recently, My 11 Circle. They came on for, I think, 7 or 8 episodes, and they have left the building at the end of their contract. And it started as I actually pitched a bunch of these ideas to, I think it was Crick Info and must have been Crick Buzz as well. And it literally offered them these ideas. And then we thought, well, we could probably make these ourselves and put them online. And we'll show you a bit of a show reel of how far things have come since we've started. But what I would say is this: a huge thank you to everyone who has watched them and shared them and commented and all the things that you've all done. So huge there. But let's no one cares about this, do they? I mean, I don't care about this. Let's start with the questions. Zirak says, do modern aspiring T20 cricketers try to emulate Sydney Barnes? From everything I've read or heard about his bowling, he'd be like Rashid Khan on steroids. It's a really, really interesting bowler, Sid Barnes. So the cricket writers at the time called him a seam bowler, and he referred to himself as a spinner. I think you have to remember that this was, before World War I, and there was certainly a hybrid element to a lot of bowlers. A lot of opening bowlers back in those days were spinners. There was a big, I'm trying to think of the best way of putting it, but like, what you would see with the slow ball cutters today. I think there was a lot of off spinners who probably bowled more cutters. So there was this, huge overlap of bowling. But Sydney Barnes was basically a very, very fast spinner. Since him, you could say that Alec Bedser, I suppose, had similar. Eric Bedser, his brother, had similar skills for Surrey. Bob Appleyard did it in really successfully. He's incredible story, Bob Appleyard. But it's funny when you ask, do aspiring cricketers try to emulate Sydney Barnes? I mean, essentially, the Fizz that's kind of what he was. Very Sydney Barnes-like bowler. He's almost a very, very fast spinner. And I know we haven't seen much of him, but Pat Brown is the other one. Now, my big worry with Pat Brown and Mustafizur is just that I'm not sure you can bowl at 135, 140, 145 even, and put the sort of revs on the ball that they do without their body falling apart. I really hope that I am wrong because, oh my God, the quality of their best balls is ridiculous and they could change cricket massively. I've said this before, Mustafizur, if he bowled left arm around in a test match and his elbow and his wrist and his finger and most importantly now his shoulder all stay intact, how do you hit someone who is bowling off cutters at 135 Ks and bowling around the wicket at you? He doesn't need the pitch realistically to help him. He doesn't need the ball to help him. He can just come in and bowl off spin and dart it around, and he's going to get the odd one straight, and a couple are just going to go through on the arm. Incredible. So yes, people are already doing that. I don't think Mustafizur is a big reader on Sydney Barnes, and as far as I'm aware, although I had chatted to Pat Brown, I could ask him this, but I don't think Pat Brown did it either. I think it's just a natural evolution from where slow balls were. I know talking to Benny Howe's, a lot of his slow balls are spin deliveries now, even more so than the off cutter on the back of the hand. Whereas Benny Howe's he was teaching himself the finger wrong in at one stage. He was working on a ball that was actually an off spinner, and I mean holding it like an off spinner. Much more. So yeah, there's certainly a lot more. There's certainly a lot more of that happening, but it's a really, really interesting question. So thank you for that one. Let's have a look here and see if we got any questions. Kartik says, do you see Dan Christian being one of the mentors in the RCB camp, guiding the youngsters while playing for the team? I mean, it's impossible for him not to be a mentor. He's 100 years old. Hi, Dan, if you're watching. But he is old. I think he's a natural leader. He probably hasn't captained as much. I've had a lot to do with him over the years. We've talked a lot about tactics and about building his game. And he's a real thinker. He's a big baseball fan. So he brings a lot of the sort of sabermetrics knowledge across from baseball. But yeah, I think I think he could certainly be a leader for RCB. I don't think that's necessarily why they got him. I think they got him because there are very few players in the world that can do the role that he does to that level. I think in the IPL, he's really a last 4 overs only batter, and I'll be happily be wrong with that. But I think that might be where his real strength lies in the IPL. But you can also bowl; he can bowl 2 overs, and in favourable conditions, he can bowl 4 overs. He's an incredibly, even as he gets older. I mean, he used to be one of the best fielders in the world. I don't think he's quite at that level with his fielding anymore. But we saw the catch the other day. He's still very athletic and he moves quite well. He's a brilliant athlete. Brilliant athlete, a hard worker, a deep thinker on the game. I think if you're building squads, those sorts of guys, even if they're not in your first 11, are really important to have around. They really show the other players, the younger players, Sometimes if you look at AB de Villiers of Virat Kohli, they're so godlike that you can't really compare yourself to them. I remember the Nasser Hussain comment years ago, do you compare, you don't look at Sachin Tendulkar or Brian Lara for inspiration. You look at Steve Waugh because you can probably try and emulate what Steve Waugh does, whereas you can't emulate the other guys. And I think Dan Christian probably in that side is quite handy. Plus, we know that, I've been on the wrong side of Dan Christian in a Big Bash final where Melbourne Stars should have absolutely won, and Dan Christian basically turned that game with a very interesting innings, and then the bowlers did brilliantly for them in the follow-up. So for me, he's a really, really important player, and he does some incredible work. And yeah, you want as many bright, driven professional people in your squad, I think, as possible, especially the guys who are over 25, 26. There's a lot of players out there that aren't like that. They're not intellectually curious. They don't work that hard. They're naturally talented. There's lots of different things going on. So I think in that particular case, Dan Christian is, an absolute solid bet from that sort of point of view. That was one of those. All right. What have we got here? Does India with Rohit and Kohli have the most formidable opening pair in the upcoming T20 tournament? If not them, which team is the strongest? Why would we watch it? Sorry, producer. I went out of order. I told you if you didn't number these, producer, I would ruin your life, and that is what I've done. I'd have to go through all the different lineups. If I'm planning for a team, I don't think I see the Rohit Virat Kohli as I wouldn't put it together as a T20 franchise. It's basically 2 anchors. I know that they can both go well beyond that, but that's kind of how they both play. They're a good matchup, I think, in other ways. But although Virat really likes to run hard, that's not really Rohit's main thing, is it? But Bairstow and Roy, or Bairstow and Hales, or Roy and Butler, as it will probably be, probably scares you more. They can rip the throat out of your bowling attack, can't they? You've still got Finch and Warner. We don't know where Finch's form will be. But again, I wonder if they can score at a slightly quicker rate. I think what you have with Rohit and Kohli is a very consistent lineup. So that they are probably very rarely going to fail, but they're probably also very rarely going to score at 10 runs and over for the first 10 overs of the game. But it's a very interesting lineup, that one. But yeah, I'd have to crunch all the numbers. But off the top of my head, I don't think if I went into that particular game, I'd be thinking very hard about how to get them out. I don't think I'd be as worried about them destroying 3 or 4 bowlers. Just based on current form and their current mindsets. I think they both have the skills to be able to do that, but it's not how both of them like to play. Okay, what have we got over here? How can you compare bowling standard of the PSL and IPL, says Aship Pratap. That's a very interesting one, Aship. I think as a general rule, we can kind of judge the quality of the competitions by the players who circle through them. So we get a very, very good idea of that. I don't know, and I haven't had to do this. I've never really worked with a team where I've needed to go through and judge the quality of different leagues, which is probably something I would have to do if I work full-time with the IPL, because you would have to look at like Kyle Jamieson's form in the Super Smash and how that would translate to the IPL and those sorts of things. That hasn't necessarily been my work so far. So I haven't done that. We know that PSL is a very high quality league, though. You make a very, very, make a very, very standard judgment that it's probably the second best league. CPL's right up there as well, with Big Bash and Bangladesh Premier League, which were both getting really good. Have probably slipped back a little bit. I would assume it's a bowling league based on the fact that that they have 100 left arm seamers that bowl at 90 miles an hour. A couple of right arm seamers bowl 100 miles an hour almost. Some very good slow ball bowlers, some quality spin, different kinds of players. But I don't have a particular metric that I use for that. I know other analysts do, but it's not something that I've particularly gone into myself. But very good question there, man. Sorry, everyone. What else have we got? What is your take on Kyle Jamieson? I feel like I've mentioned Kyle Jamieson quite a bit so far in the videos. He's taken wickets. I mean, that was one of the reasons he was hired. He hit out the other day with the bat. All my same basic concerns are there. But he's got wickets with bounce later on in the innings, which I think is huge. It'd be really interesting to see how. I think he got Warner out. I'm trying to think who the other batter he got out with bounce later in the innings was. It'd be really interesting to see how he goes up against younger Indian players, even on a flatter pitch. If he can get that extra steep bounce, it might be a really, really good buy if that's the case. I don't think he's been anywhere near as good in the power play as they would have hoped so far, but this is not the this is not the pitch for power play specialist seamers, is it really? But it'd be very interesting to see how he goes. I think his batting. It was interesting to watch him up against Harbhajan. I thought he thought his way through that situation really, really well. There's a lot to like there so far, but we're a long way away from knowing. I mean, realistically, he's played 3 games, has he? Who have we got? We've got Riley Meredith, Jai Richardson, those sort of big, expensive punts. Chris Morris is not a punt, is he? We know what Chris Morris is going to do. He may do worse this year than other years, but we know what his game can be. The other 3 are punts. I think of the big 3 punts, I think Kyle Jamieson has been the best of those. Jai Richardson has probably bowled a lot more good balls than Riley Meredith. And Riley Meredith has had some good moments and some horrendous moments. But I think Jamieson is at the best of those 3 sort of major guys. If you look through that, all right. Zirak says from Twitter, thoughts on Avesh Khan, Sakaria, Arshdeep, and Harshal Patel. All right. Avesh Khan, good pace, good action, repeatable. Interesting that they look like they already want to bowl him as a death bowler. That shows that they might already. I think he came on the 10th or 11th over the other night. That shows that they've already got a very strong idea of maybe what his strengths and weaknesses are. That's good. You don't always know that with a player, or it could have just been dumb luck. I mean, we don't know. It's a one-off game. But I thought he bowled really well considering the run rate. I know he went up against Gale and KL Rahul, and they were both in a go slow at that point. But if he'd bowled bad, they probably would have taken him down as well. So I thought he bowled quite well. Sakaria, he's got a lot of good tricks. We hear a lot about him swinging the ball back. There hasn't been a lot of swing so far, so I'm not too worried that he hasn't swung the ball back. Jai Richardson hasn't swung the ball. So I think in that particular case, I think that's probably fair. And then we have, but there's something there. Arshdeep, I actually had a bit of a look at Arshdeep. He's a really, really interesting one for me. Arshdeep he's got most of his. I think he's taking a wicket every 6 balls or something in the death. That's where all of his wickets are coming, or a huge percentage of his wickets are coming. If you take out his wickets at the death, he's going at over 9 runs and over, and he's not looking like a IPL quality bowler. But he is taking wickets at the moment, so you don't want to have a go at that. But there's nothing in his particular bowling that makes me feel overly comfortable with him at the moment. And Harshal Patel. Harshal Patel, look, I've talked about Harshal Patel heaps. It's interesting that you asked that question. I think that I just want to see him away from Chennai now. I want to see if this is pitch based or if he's, changed his game and in the best form, changed his technique to find the best form of his life. So that's the most interesting thing I have about Harshal Patel. Srinivas Sugu says, would you expect Markram to sign up for the auction next year? Hate auctions, by the way. Okay. Yeah, he's an interesting one. He bowls a little bit of off spin too, doesn't he? And I know it's not exactly IPL standard, but 1 or 2 overs a game here and there might be handy. I can see him. I mean, if you think of Faf du Plessis, there's no reason why Markram can't do that. I think he's as talented as batsman as Faf is. I think he perhaps can score quicker these days. Faf is not. He's scoring quick days. Not past him, obviously. He played a good innings recently, but he's certainly not absolutely brilliant when it comes to scoring quickly these days. But I could see him as a role player. I wouldn't think he would be a starting 11 player for anyone unless they had a massive hole that had a sort of his face on them type of pitch. If there's a team that specifically wants that sort of, what would you call him? He's almost like an anchor plus type player. I'd have to have a look at his record in South Africa, in Asia a little bit more as well. But there's clearly something about him. Look, I think he's a phenomenally talented player. I actually think he's come on a little bit slower than I would have expected. It'd be very interesting to see where he is in a 1.5 to 2 years' time, because, he's got the quality and the skills to basically dominate all 3 formats of cricket. And I don't think we've seen him anywhere near that level yet. So, but he's definitely a very good player there. Thank you, Srinivas, for your support. All right. Crick Ricky on Twitter says, should Pooran continue to bat at 5, or considering his spin hitting ability, should he be promoted to 4? I mean, I thought they were going to promote him to 4, so I'm a little bit confused at why he's playing at 5 in the first place, really. So when he started, he batted very low, didn't he? He batted 5, he batted 6, he might have even batted 7 at times when he was younger. And I thought it really dictated the way he went about his batting. As he's gone up the order and played more one-day cricket, I think he's really developed as a thinker. Before, I think he was trying to make such a big impact every time he went out there that it didn't quite work for him. For me, he's a number 4 in T20, a modern number 4, I suppose. Essentially, after the 6th over, he's the person I would be sending in these situations, which makes it a bit tough with Gale in the team if they haven't taken a wicket in the power play, they lost a wicket in the power play. But yeah, as you said, he plays spin brilliantly. He has the ability to, where other players can score at 7, 7.5 and over in between overs, 7 to 14. He has the ability to score at 8, 9, 10 plus. That's huge, especially when you have other batters around him that can come in if he fails. For me, I think you just get him in as early as possible and let him wreak havoc. I think also just on current, he's. Santiago Vasquez said yesterday he's not hitting them very well before he came into bat. He'd faced 3 balls. He'd actually hit 2 of them, I think. I think he needs to bat at 4 just so they can just give him a bit of a run as well. But for me, he's a number 4. I think Crickviz did a very good piece, didn't they? I think Ben Jones might have written that one about where he should bat. I find it very hard to argue that he can do that. It'd be very interesting to see if he transforms how number 4s play. He's just a phenomenal talent. I don't think people... I've been having a fight with a guy on Twitter for a couple of days. I don't think people actually understand how talented he is. And also, when you consider his story, not playing first-class cricket and everything, falling out with Trinidad, is incredible talent. Incredible talent. Okay. What have we got here? Vinay Kumar says, do you think IPL with 10 teams will happen? What's your take on that? Well, they've already basically started. getting the owners, haven't they? I think that, Ahmedabad's going to have a team, my man. That's a big ground not to have a team at. Yes, I mean, it'll eventually have 12, 14, 16, 18 teams, won't it? Would be my guess. That's how I would run it. Have 2 teams out of Mumbai. Only kidding. Nagpur will probably have a team. Won't be putting my hand up to cover that one. Pune, there's some big places in India that, they haven't even really marketed yet. They might want a tourism place up north. No, they'll definitely do that. Makes sense. I think if anything, they've been a bit slow. I would like, I think we'll probably get down to we'll have 14 teams, maybe in a 5 to 10 year period. And in those 14 teams, I think they'll probably change the amount of overseas players to maybe 6, which I think is a decent move. I think there's enough Indian talent that you don't even need to protect that. I mean, Bangalore went in with, was it yesterday or one of their games with only 3 overseas players? That shows you the talent of India. I don't think you particularly need that anymore. Also, I think just for the IPL in future, there's a few little things, isn't there? Like not having the Pakistani players and, imagine the NBA just being like, we can't have Chinese players. Or, we can't have Russian players. It's a bit of a ridiculous thing. So I think those sorts of things will move on. And the overseas player is another thing that will move on. I think there'll always be a bit of a limit. And also it makes sense. And this, it's a very, very young league in a very, very patriotic country at the moment. I think those sort of things make sense. But as we get to 12, 14, 16, 18, 28, 30 teams, things might change a little bit. And I do think it will expand, but it will take a long time. But yeah, I think there should certainly be more teams and it will be a longer tournament, will be my guess. And eventually we'll play more than one game a night as well, which will be the other thing that will start to happen. You'll have marquee games and you'll have less marquee games. I don't think the IPL as a general rule is quite worked out. Marquee, how to sell marquee matchups and how to build grudges and all those sorts of things that other leagues do. But perhaps that's just because it's a newer league, to be very fair to them. What else have we got here? Arthur's Vax from Twitter says, how much of the success at Chennai from ABD and Maxwell is because of the ability to switch it against the field towards smaller boundaries? I suppose all these things are involved. I wouldn't say specifically that I've looked at that and said that is the main reason. I mean, Maxwell makes runs at the MCG. I don't know if you've seen the dimensions of that wicket square. I've seen him hit sixes reverse and reversing and switching there. So no, I don't think that's a major part of it. But it might be part of their instant success at the moment, if you know what I mean. But I remember years ago, it was when I was working for Melbourne Stars, I think, and Maxwell made a lot of runs in Hobart, and they had a short boundary there. Maxwell just reversed. I will switch everything to the short boundary. That is how he thinks. It's certainly a tactic that he likes. He is very ground aware. You don't see that with all batters. You don't see that with all batters with his sort of lunacy, I suppose you would put it. Like for instance, Pooran will take on the bigger boundary. I'm trying to remember what ground I saw Pooran do that on. Might have been in the World Cup. Took on the bigger boundaries at a GS Bowl. Pooran's a little bit more, I will back my strength and I will back my ball hitting ability. Whereas Maxwell's a little bit more ground dependent, field dependent, the way that he thinks about batting. So, I mean, there might be a part of what you've said that is true, but I just think that just shows, put it this way. You can't do that unless you're seeing the ball well. You can't do that unless you're confident. You can't do that unless your technique is sound. You can't do that probably unless you're set, although, you can get away with one or two early on. That's not because of the short boundary. That's sort of come in at the end, if that makes sense. So it's a really interesting question. But yeah, I think there's probably a little bit more to it than that. Just go back to the YouTubes. Bhargav BS says, what do you think about stacking T20 lineups with all-rounders? Having deep batting lineups at 7 and 8 bowling options. CSK tried it. RCB currently. All right. Here, this is one of my big pet peeves. What is an all-rounder? Dan Christian is not an all-rounder in T20 cricket. He's a batter who can give you maybe 2 overs a game. There are certain conditions, like maybe playing for knots, where it suits seam-up bowlers a little bit more. There are a handful of all-rounders in the world. Andre Russell, in current form, is no longer an all-rounder. Who else we got? I can go through the list if you want. Hassan Narayan, if he plays, is probably an all-rounder. Shakib Al Hassan should be an all-rounder, although I'm not sure his batting or his bowling's quite up to it anymore. Kyle Jamieson is a bowler who hits. Pat Cummins is a bowler who hits. Hardik Pandya, when he bowls 4 overs a game, is an all-rounder. Krunal Pandya is probably an all-rounder. Karen Pollard's not an all-rounder. What you're really talking about is players who have other skills, right? They are almost precious few all-rounders. And here's the other thing. Look at Kyle Jamieson's price compared to Riley Meredith or Chris Morris's price compared to everyone. Once you have all-round skills, and Chris Morris is not what I would call an all-rounder. He's a bowler who hits, which is basically what he said, I think, the other day when he made his runs. Once you have those particular skills, the price goes through the roof. Everyone would pick all-rounders if they could. It's just that there aren't that many out there. I think it's one of those things that we talk about all-rounders a lot, but we don't actually sit down and think about them. And it's something I've written about, and I'm not sure if I've done so much in the videos so far, but an all-rounder is not what we think it is at all. Put it this way, Marco Jansen put himself down as an all-rounder for the auction. Dawid Malan put himself down as a all-rounder for the auction. It is a ridiculous... I'm trying to think of, when I do my categories for players, I would have maybe less than 10 or 15 global traveling players. Someone like JJ Smuts, perhaps, is one. Dwayne Bravo was, but I think his batting's probably slipped off now, but certainly was for a very long time. Andre Russell is if his knees work, which they currently don't. There really aren't that many all-rounders in the world. Like, would you say Maxwell's an all-rounder? You're not getting 4 overs out of him every game, are you? He's a batter who gives you a little bit of bowling. And I think that's what you're saying. I think the most all-round team, weirdly, it's weird that I think, who did you pick? CSK have tried it, RCB currently. CSK have the most, one of the deepest batting lineups I've seen in a franchise team. They can bat to 11, or hit to 11, I should say. You don't see that often. Obviously, England did that. That's the dream. That's what you should be doing. What you want is 5 frontline bowlers, maybe 2 other guys who with a little bit of bowling that you can use on bad days, and to be able to hit 6s all the way down to 11. That is the dream. But in order to do that, more often than not, you don't pick your best bowlers if you want to bat all the way down to 11, or you're putting a lot of pressure on bowlers. I forgot the obvious one. Go and check out the Ben Stokes video. Ben Stokes is a perfect example of someone who is no longer an all-rounder in the IPL. He's not. He doesn't bowl. He's averaging 11 balls per game. He's a part-timer in the IPL. So I think you have to think about it that way. And when you have a part-time, there is a reason those guys are not bowling 4 overs a game, right? And that is because they will get met if they bowl all the time. Anyway, we're going to have a very, very short break because, as I said at the start, this is the 1-year anniversary of this here YouTube channel. And I'd just like to say a huge thank you again to everyone who has been involved, who has commented, who has shared, who's liked the videos. It's huge for me. I didn't really know what this is. Aria, who obviously helps, runs this channel. Doesn't help run it. He runs it. He had been desperate for me to get involved for years. And I said, the last thing I want to do is sit in front of a camera talking. But that is why we went the other way. That is why we went with the animation and these sorts of things. It's worked so far, and we're just going to keep trying different things as and when they come to us. So, and as a special treat or as special torture, in this break, we have a collection of random things that we have done so far in like a little trailer package. So sit back and enjoy old Jarrod and new Jarrod.
Hi, I'm Jarrod Kimber. You may remember me from annoying cricket boards. What is a good area? I don't hear you ask. Well, it's the sweet spot right near the pleasure zone, in the corridor of come hither.
But over the last few years, it's become fashionable, like woolen shoes and becoming a health goal. Recently in tests, right-arm bowlers have delivered 40% of their balls from around the wicket to left-handers.
Milan, I think last year when we played England in Malahide, and I was just chatting batting, and I don't know how old he is now, around 32, 33, maybe a bit older, but he's...
When she was attacked by a man on a snowmobile, she could have obviously pulled out at that point. She decided instead to go on, and she finished third. So that's what I'm looking for here from my opening batsman. I want someone who will go very long into the innings, has great endurance, but also understands that at times you're going to get hurt. You've just got to keep going. That is Ali Zirkle that I made up. So let's have a look at these guys. I didn't think Shan Masood was a test player the first time I saw it. That up a bit more. Of the bowlers with more than 100 test wickets in this period, he's got the 4th best average and the 7th best economy. Anderson has been the best in every single way, and these guys up here have struggled a bit more. There is Trent Boult in the middle, and here is Wagner. Drinking cricketer. I find that weird, but I also find it weird that as a non-tea drinker, I still have to stop for tea in a cricket game.
This is from the World Observer. It says if you compared it to baseball, it'd be like pitching 3 perfect games on 3 consecutive days.
Really?
In the 2016 Daily Telegraph, they ran this piece when Australia toured India. It's not that other test nations don't end up with weird arguments and nonsense during their series. That's a fairly standard cricket thing. It's part of being option. They see it as a catching position. Look at today. The first ball that Jack Leap bowled to Rishabh Pant, he had a long on end, and yet Pant came down the wicket to smash the ball over his head anyway. He mishit the ball for 1, and it didn't really matter where the fielders were because Pant wasn't really trying to keep the ball inside the playing arena.
Remember the name is what Ian Bishop said about Carlos Brathwaite when he won the 2016 World Cup. For the longest time, Ben Stokes was also remembered for that over. Well, not even an over, 4 balls. Every remembrance of Brathwaite was often attached.
Have you seen one of his big innings? It's doubtful. Have you seen 2 of them? Very unlikely. If you've seen 3, there is a 44% chance that you are Ben Dunk.
My 11 circle. Bowl first. Me, Jarrod Kimber, talking about what just happened in this game. What just happened in this game? Chris Morris just happened. And since then, Narayan has learned to hit sixes, evolved to open the batting, perfected the first truly slow knuckle ball, and then stuck the ball up his own bum on the way in just to disguise it. Here we go. What a way to cut back to me as I talk about someone sticking something up their own bum, which does seem very apt if we're being fair there. Another one from Twitter. Given the advert of analytics and all the matchups, a few captains going overboard with the data and not staying aware to the current situation of the game. This is about the Morgan and Varun Chakravarti thing yesterday. This is from Shiv Ram G94. Don't know if I had to read out the whole thing, but I have now. Yeah, that's what we've done. I find this hilarious. I actually talked to this guy a little bit on Twitter last night. When a mistake is made now, and it's a random one, people are, too much data in the game. People aren't using their natural instincts. There's a couple of things here. We don't know that Owen Morgan wasn't using his natural instincts. We don't actually know that Owen Morgan wasn't just out in the field going, all right, well, Maxi might get himself out because he does quite a bit. And I really need a strike bowler. And I only have 1 strike bowler in my team. If I remember correctly, Varun Chakravarti is the only strike bowler from last year that Kolkata had. Then they had to keep him back for AB de Villiers because, oh my God, we saw why. It makes perfect sense to be able to do that. Now, all that data is really doing is giving people more information. If you're saying there's too much data in the game, you're literally saying there's too much information. This whole idea that that there is too much, that there is too much information, I don't get that, and I also don't think that probably haven't been involved. Owen Morgan isn't going through spreadsheets before a game, right? I think Nathan Lehman's working with him. So Nathan Lehman obviously has been the England analyst and is very close friends with Owen Morgan. My guess is that Nathan Lehman does a similar thing to what I do, except probably better because he's done it for a lot longer. Is that he will go to the captains with a couple of things that he thinks is important. Most of the stuff he's probably been telling Owen Morgan it's been seeping in over years. About the hot hand fallacy, about the reading pitches. I'm trying to think of other things about boundaries over singles, all those sorts of things. It's not like he's telling Owen Morgan that every day. What he's probably saying to Owen Morgan in this particular situation is, we only have one strike bowler in this team. And I'm putting words in Nathan Lehman's mouth here. I haven't talked to Nathan Lehman. These are not the thoughts or opinions of Kolkata analyst Nathan Lehman. But he's probably saying, look, remember, we've only got one out-and-out strike bowler in this team at the moment. And we really, really do need him to be bowling to AB at one stage. That's a very possible thing. It's also a very possible thing that he gave all that information, might have even given up really good matchup data, which is, I think, the other thing that he could have done. And even with all that information, Owen Morgan still read the game and went, I think Maxi might get himself out here. We can probably just keep pressure on him and see what he does. Whereas we need our best bowler for AB later on. It's also possible that they originally, their original plan was, we're going to bowl a three of Chakravarti up the front, and then not as much later on. I think there's a lot of people, when they look at these games, they see right and wrong. There is no right and wrong in these games. I promise you, there is no right decision. There is no wrong decision. There are more right decisions and more wrong decisions. And over time, all you're trying to do is put everything in your favor. And that's what information and data is basically trying to do. Of, this is what this person does. This is the best case scenario. But let me tell you a story. We had, I worked with a team who in the power play tried a part-timer quite early on. And I thought that was quite weird, and the over didn't quite work. And I was like, well, that's good. That's finished. And then later on in the power play, I went back to this part-timer. And everyone in our team was absolutely like, this is the worst tactical decision ever. Why has this happened? I think on Twitter, people said it was a matchup thing. So they were literally inferring that I had suggested it. I didn't even think the guy should bowl, let alone in the power play, let alone twice in the power play after getting met. And everyone, I remember online people saying, oh, it's a matchup thing, or this team's getting too fancy and all this sort of stuff. And when I talked to the captain later, the captain said one of the bowlers, of the guys who are available to bowl on the power play, one had already bowled at the other end. The other one I needed to hold back for the death because I was worried that I wouldn't have enough bowlers at the death. And the one guy I asked to bowl the over said, I can't bowl from that end. Weird things happen in these games. And there are, data is something that we use to make the decisions easier for captains, to make things simpler and to keep everything in their favor. But cricket games are cricket games. And there ain't no decision. I've never seen a cricket team that fundamentally only makes decisions based on data. And you can't because of the cricket pitch. So, no, I don't think that captains are going overboard with it. I think that captains have got confused with things. I think that captains get very confused with matchup data at times. So, for instance, Mitchell Santner was taken out of the attack when they played Australia in the World Cup because there were two left-handers. And I think they went, well, we need the ball spinning away from left-handers. And so Kane Williamson bowled. Mitchell Santner is a really good bowler against left-handers. Do you know what I mean? So is that a case of him going overboard with the data or not actually going deep enough into the data to understand his player well enough? I don't know. Could have been a short boundary thing as well. There are so many different factors. So there you go. There is that. Vashnas Narain says, what should DC do to defeat Mumbai in Chennai with Mumbai persevering with Bolt Bumrah in the death? Oh, okay. You have to score a lot of runs early on. When's that game? Is that game tomorrow, isn't it? Sorry, looking at my wall chart. You have to score a lot of runs early on. You have to take some chances, I think. I think it might be slightly different if you're not chasing. I think the chasing aspect, I think facing Bumrah specifically at the death when you're chasing is a really tough. It's a completely different mental thing. If you're chasing him if you're facing him in the first innings, there's almost a freedom to it, if that makes sense. That you know that you have the option to sort of fail. There's less option to fail when you're chasing someone against someone like Bumrah. So look, I think pinch hitters on this pitch. I saw Matthew Hayden saying that he wants everyone to go up 15 runs and over. I don't think your top order is necessarily going to be able to do that. I also don't think that you can have one guy sitting in and have the other guy smacking the ball everywhere. I think you really need kind of both to go very hard there in this situation, which is why I like one attacking opener, say, and a pinch hitter. If the attacking opener goes out, you replace him with another attacking batter. And if the pinch hitter goes out, you consider bringing in another pinch hitter. I think is probably the best way of going there. But it's not ideal. But it is I think Mumbai have been helped by the fact that they've got goodish totals, good enough, at least par totals, and then they have Bumrah, and Bumrah makes par look ridiculous. And Bolt's been really good as well, hasn't it? Be interesting to see if that sticks around. Stark's Reality says, from getting absolutely carted by Russell in 2019 for going for over 1 run against him in 2021, thoughts on the evolution of Siraj? Yeah, I mean, completely different situations. Russell went into that over needing 44 runs in 12 balls. He was only looking for sixes, which, I'm not saying he doesn't have that mindset at times anyway, but it's a completely different kind of batting. He's also not in the form that he was in 2019 right at the moment, although I thought his setup looked a little bit better than he has for a little while. But Siraj is improving. It's funny, I think I saw someone else, I think there might have been another question in the comments, where someone else said something along the lines of Siraj, what's the sudden change in Siraj? And it's not about sudden changes. If you're an IPL bowler, an Indian IPL bowler, you're not playing in other leagues. You have 10 months of the year, realistically, to work on one skill if you wanted to. We saw with, I'm going to forget his name, the Australian domestic batter who said that he started working for 8 hours a day on his game. I think he based it on Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine. Look, I think there are a lot of incredibly talented and hardworking cricketers out there. It's very rare to hear a cricketer say they work for 8 hours a day on their game, especially in the off season. Now, obviously, you can't do it in season. You need to conserve your energy and you need to work smarter. But in the off season, if I was involved with a cricketer or a team, that's what I would be doing. I'd be doing 8-hour sessions. Structure it like a full day of work. In the morning, we're going to do. So let's say you're Siraj. Every morning, he's going to come in and he's going to bowl wide Yorkers for the first little while. Then he's going to take a break, and we're going to look at maybe clips of various slow balls, maybe even baseball pitches for something for a little while. Then he'll do probably some core work on his body. Then we come back in the afternoon for another thing of one new slow ball that he's working on, and we would do that for 4 weeks. And then the next 4 weeks, once he was happy with those deliveries, we would look at two other new things that he could come in. And perhaps with him, it might be some hitting as well, because he's not the worst batter in the world. So when it comes to the evolution of these players, I think that's how that sort of stuff works. Arahan Ajit says, what do you think about having Ben Cutting instead of Shakib Al Hassan in Mumbai? He's an aggressive all-rounder and a decent pace option for Wankhede. Have you seen Ben Cutting bowl? Don't know if decent pace option is what I think. He's tall. Hits the ball a long way. I think if Sunil Narine was fit, and I'm hearing he's not fit, I think he would be playing ahead of Sunil Narine at the moment, is what I think on that. Ben Cutting, he might play in other surfaces. I don't see him specifically as a Chennai player, but as they move to other surfaces, Ben Cutting could work. I think he's a really interesting player, Ben Cutting. I'm not sure he's an all-rounder. What is your personal opinion is the current best T20 batsman in the world, says Kobus Jans van Ransberg. AB de Villiers. That's not a question. I mean, everyone thinks that, don't they? I hope. Just going back to some of the T20 ones. Someone, a Pranav cricketer says, Malan in for Gale if he can play the anchor. As he can play the anchor if required, will give KL Raul more freedom. Well, okay, let's play this through a little bit here. If you can't bat with freedom with Chris Gale in your side, knowing that he averages more than Dawid Malan does, probably faces more balls per innings than Dawid Malan, is clearly a better player than Dawid Malan. He's a slow starter like Dawid Malan. Why would you then need Dawid Malan to replace him? KL Raul is playing slow. It is a choice he has made. Did he not make 50 or 30 in one of the ODIs? I think that's right. 50 or 35, maybe. It's not like he's forgotten how to play quick. And he's got Chris Gale and Mayank Agarwal in his top 3. He could have Nicholas Pooran in his top 4. This is a choice he's making. I think it's the wrong choice. But this is a choice he is making to bat. And, I've heard, you see it on Twitter, the stat padding thing. I don't think it's a stat padding thing. I have come across players in T20 cricket who stat pad in a professional and also just from, watching on. I don't think KL Raul is doing stat padding. I think he thinks that he needs to be the anchor for this team. I think that he has decided that this is his role. I think it is a tragic waste of talent for him to be the anchor. I think you could certainly find other players who can be the anchor in this particular team. He has the ability to average 30 to 35 with a strike rate of 145 plus. There ain't many players who can do that. So for me, I would not be doing that. But, that's the decision he's made. Be interesting to see if they continue with that. I said in today's video must have been that I can actually see in certain situations the way he's playing working. I can see with Jai Richardson batting at number 7, he might feel possible that he has to do that. Where we are at now with Jai Richardson batting 8 yesterday, Nicholas Pooran coming in right at the end of the game, I don't see. That was a poor innings. It was an inefficient innings. He scored at 7.5 runs and over in a game where the overall rate was at 10.5 runs and over. That means the guys at the other end have to score at 13.5 runs and over to stay at par with what Delhi were doing. You can't do that. I'm sorry. No one can do that consistently. I think that's if you have a great bowling attack, you can do it. But anyway, it's all in the video. I've already done it. So go and check out the video from earlier today. All right. Let's see what we've got on the chat over here. Path Langa says, who would be your South African 11 for a T20I World Cup if AB and Morris are both available? I think we're assuming there that South Africa will still be an international cricket team by the time the World Cup's around. I think there's a lot needs to happen. I don't think the ICC is looking at kicking them out, but everyone is upset. What has happened in Cricket South Africa over the past 3.5 years is a crime against cricket. It is one of the worst things I've seen in our game, and our game has had some of the worst administration ever of any sport. And Cricket South Africa have been absolutely abysmal, step after step. When their bubble fell down against England, and look, they tried to spin it a little bit. I think their bubble would have been fine against Australia. I think they learnt their lessons. But one of the reasons they struggled with their bubble is that Graham Smith was largely in charge of that. What in Graham Smith's background says that he should be in charge of something like that? That is when you hire specific people. That is when you get events planners and organisers and people who are, Steve Elworthy did it for England. And he is a South African, obviously. Steve Elworthy played in the 99 World Cup. Steve Elworthy has been planning events for a very long time. Big events, small events, medium events. He knows how to plan an event. Graham Smith does not. It is absolute shit show over there. And there are people who are hanging on to jobs that they should not be hanging on to. There are people putting their financial security ahead of the game. There are people who are putting their personal pride ahead of the game. And it is, it's very rare that you say the government getting involved with cricket is a good thing. Someone had to do something over there. And I just hope that cricket South Africa can be saved. So no, it's not so much that I'm in looking at the 11s. I just hope that they actually have a team going ahead. Tuk 96 on Twitter says, why won't Daly bat Stoinis up the order instead of Smith and use that slot to bring in either Hetmeyer or Nortje? Well, Nortje's got COVID, doesn't he? I think that's right. Certainly, I believe that's why he hasn't been playing. Hetmeyer should have played in this last game. Smith, if he was in the side, should not have come in to the team, I would have said. I found that very, very bizarre that he did. So yeah, your plan of moving Stoinis up the order. Stoinis played a really good innings last night, didn't he? So many games. But you know, we had to work out how to use him at Melbourne Stars when I was there, and I think that was the first time he became a permanent opener anywhere. He just looks so much better at the top of the innings. He's probably not going to be able to open consistently in the IPL or for Australia. Number 3 is kind of the next best thing for him. And then perhaps what you can do is, if you do lose a wicket in, say, the 7th or 8th over, you just use someone else. But yeah, I don't think Smith, as that team is currently constructed, it needs to be there. I think Rishabh could bat 3 or Stoinis can bat 3. And in certain situations, Hetmeyer could bat 3 as well, especially if the spinners are already there. You probably want Hetmeyer to come out. So I think they have a lot of different options there available to them. And yeah, I think you're probably right. I think maybe they did that because there'd been a loss. I'm not sure. What have we got here? Stark's Reality says, similarities between cricket and the ESL and soccer. Thoughts on that? Look, I don't know much about the ESL. I get the feeling from my friends who do like football, but I haven't looked into it yet, that they're trying to do what cricket was trying to do, which is create they're trying to create a system that makes a lot of money in the short term, but will cause massive problems down the line, but will make sure that the power base stays with the people who are already powerful. I mean, we've been there in cricket. We will continue to be there in cricket for quite some time. I don't know. I don't know how serious they are and how much they are just doing this in a way to shake some things loose. But sport is a business, and I think we tend to think of it as only being a business now. Let me tell you some fun facts about cricket. Cricket was the first sport to put a gate up, essentially, and that was in the 1850s, 1860s. The Australian team went on strike in 1911. I think that's right. Victor Trumper, the golden boy of the sepia age of cricket, went on strike. These are businesses, but I always think that part of the problem is that when a major football team or a major cricket nation think that they are above everyone else, I think that you have to remember that for England and India and Australia, they have built cricket on the back of New Zealand and Sri Lanka and West Indies and all these other teams. If cricket was just a 3-way triangular series between those main 3 countries, I don't think it would have got to this level. It needs Pakistan. It needs South Africa. And I think that the football thing's the same. If you take away the options for great upsets, it'd be very interesting to see where it goes. I just don't see it as a very good long-term plan. But, I don't know enough about football to go directly into how all these things work. Football seems to be doing okay financially. I'm not sure that it needs a massive shake-up at the moment. But, hey, that's not for me, I suppose. Bokav says, what do you think of Shami as a T20 bowler? Oh, you're going to like my video that is coming out on Wednesday, I think. I think he's really good in the middle overs, which I think you've said there, Bokav. I don't think he can't bowl in the power play. I don't know why, but he can't. He's also not a very good death bowler. So I think you're talking about him as an Indian bowler. I can't see how he's in India's best 5. Are you asking about him as an Indian bowler? Especially for India, yeah. I mean, it's this big decision to pick him to bowl in the Plunkett role. Don't forget, Plunkett's versatility was quite important, as in Plunkett could bat, and England had a bunch of all-rounders around them. So if Plunkett had a game where it didn't work, Ben Stokes could pick up an over or two, or Moeen Ali could pick up an over or two. Unless Ravi Jadeja bats at 6 and Hardik bats at 7, that's already gone. And Mohammed Shami doesn't offer Plunkett's batting. Remember, Plunkett tied a game, or drew a game. Tied a game? Was it one day? It wasn't. It must have been a tie. With a 6 against Sri Lanka. Like he can hit. Really, really good player. I see the basic thing that you're coming up with there. Just not sure. I'm not sure that I would buy that at the moment, but it's a long tournament. I think there's a lot of places up for grabs for a lot of these international teams going forward. And I think there'll be a lot of IPL players trying to show what they can do to ensure that they're in their teams. So it's definitely a very interesting question. I will finish up with one. I'm not going to answer Matthew Maltman's, what does Theo Doropoulos have to do to get a gig in the IPL? Although, isn't he a weatherman? Is he a weatherman? Or is he a reporter? Theo Doropoulos. For those who don't know, Theo Doropoulos was a domestic cricketer in Australia, had an incredible under-19 World Cup. So big shout out to Theo there. But he's retired and is now a weatherman in Australia. He's a good hitter of the ball, but it never quite worked for him. And the last one, should IPL auctions be scrapped in favor of free agents, signings, draft systems as in the NBA? Well, everyone, that's from Genil Bijou. Last question from Genil Bijou there. Anyone who knows me would know that I prefer that system. I get the auction. I know there are a lot of people who like the auction because it's something different and it's a point of difference. I think it would be. I don't think it's the most ideal system. I like new player draft and an old player draft. I think is quite cool. And then you have a free agency signing sort of around that, which we kind of have anyway for injury replacements and all those sorts of things. But yeah, I'd like a double draft, which actually weirdly, if I sold it to the IPL, they might like that. Maybe for the new players, you have an auction, and then you have an old players draft. Whichever order that you want to go about doing something like that. But I think that from my point of view, I think the draft sort of makes a little bit more sense, follows on a little bit better. But yeah, it's a really good question. The auction is such a bizarre beast, isn't it? At the moment, the way that the auction works, I feel that it's really good for players' bank accounts, but I'm not sure it always works for. Put it this way: if you were to go number 2 in the draft, and someone else went number 5 in the draft, we would say, well, they both went top 5 picks, and one of them worked, and one of them didn't. Whereas in the auction, it feels like one of you can go for 1.8 million, and the player who's just beneath them can go for like 400 grand. And I get the market aspect of it, and I get the fun side of it, but it puts a lot of pressure on the 1.8 million dollar guy, and he's not worth that much, and the other guy's worth more than 400 grand. Whereas a draft allows that to be a lot more of a even keeled thing. Look, that's how I feel about it. I don't think it's going to change. I think the IPL really like the auction, but it's weird how often when I do stuff like this, people ask about it. So it is certainly something that people think about a lot. Now, again, just want to thank everyone for being on this live today. Also for all your support, for following, for subscribing. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. I don't know if it changes your life, but it helps us. And yeah, yesterday was the 1-year anniversary of this. So if you haven't seen, there's some incredible stuff. There's really interesting Harsha Bhogle interview I did a very long time ago, which I really liked. I've done some really good Red Inca episodes. I know that a lot of them are audio only, and a lot of people on YouTube don't like that, but there's some really good interviews to go back on there. I think it's also worth looking at, Neil Wagner, the most improved player. If you're an Aaron Sorkin fan, there's obviously some Aaron Sorkin content. And just of recent times, the Ben Dunk video. That's the sort of stuff that we're trying to push towards going to, in the future. That's what we're looking at, making more of the Ben Stunk style content. So really, if you can watch that, if you can share that, we can make more of them. That's kind of how it works. Advertisers are already quite interested in them, but the site's still quite early on in its development. Obviously, My 11 Circle came on for about 7 or 8 episodes and they've left. So we'll be looking at other people and other companies going ahead. But essentially, it's you guys. The more you support us, the more you share our content, the more you watch and comment for the algorithm and all those sorts of things, the better it is for us. So thank you so much. And to finish off, here is that trailer again of all of our work from the beginning through to today.
Hi, I'm Jarrod Kimber. You may remember me from annoying cricket boards. What is a good area? I don't hear you ask. Well, it's the sweet spot, right near the pleasure zone, in the corridor of come hither. But over the last few years, it's become fashionable, like woolen shoes and becoming a health goal. Recently in tests, right-arm bowlers have delivered 40% of their balls from around the wicket to left-handers.
Milan, I think last year when we played England in Malahide, and I was just chatting batting, and I don't know how old he is now, around 32, 33, maybe a bit older, but he's...
When she was attacked by a man on a snowmobile, she could have obviously pulled out at that point. She decided instead to go on, and she finished third. So that's what I'm looking for here from my opening batsman. I want someone who will go very long into the innings, has great endurance, but also understands that at times you're going to get hurt. You've just got to keep going. That is Ali Zirkle that I made up. So let's have a look at these guys. I didn't think Shan Masood was a test player the first time I saw it. That up a bit more. Of the bowlers with more than 100 test wickets in this period, he's got the 4th best average and the 7th best economy. Anderson has been the best in every single way, and these guys up here have struggled a bit more. There is Trent Boult in the middle, and here is Wagner. Drinking cricketer. I find that weird, but I also find it weird that as a non-tea drinker, I still have to stop for tea in a cricket game.
This is from the World Observer. It says if you compared it to baseball, it'd be like pitching 3 perfect games on 3 consecutive days. Really?
In the 2016 Daily Telegraph, they ran this piece when Australia toured India. It's not that other test nations don't end up with weird arguments and nonsense during their series. That's a fairly standard cricket thing. It's part of being option. They see it as a catching position. Look at today. The first ball that Jack Leap bowled to Rishabh Pant, he had a long on end, and yet Pant came down the wicket to smash the ball over his head anyway. He mishit the ball for 1, and it didn't really matter where the fielders were because Pant wasn't really trying to keep the ball inside the playing arena.
Remember the name is what Ian Bishop said about Carlos Brathwaite when he won the 2016 World Cup. For the longest time, Ben Stokes was also remembered for that over. Well, not even an over, 4 balls. Every remembrance of Brathwaite was often attached.
Have you seen one of his big innings? It's doubtful. Have you seen 2 of them? Very unlikely. If you've seen 3, there is a 44% chance that you are Ben Dunk.
My 11 Circle. Bowl first. Me, Jarrod Kimber, talking about what just happened in this game. What just happened in this game? Chris Morris just happened. And since then, Narayan has learned to hit sixes, evolved to open the batting, perfected the first truly slow knuckle ball, and then stuck the ball up his own bum on the way in just to disguise it. It's such a hard cut from that back to me again. Thank you. Apparently I have to say goodbye one last time. So I'm going to say goodbye one last time. But thank you so much for your support. And I hope you like this live. I think we'll probably do them every Monday of the IPL. And it might be something that we just keep around because they're good fun. So thank you very much. And I will see you tomorrow. Well, I mean, I'll be on a video tomorrow and you'll see me tomorrow is really what I mean. See you then.